The following is a UAP citizen hearing testimony by Division Chief John Callahan, a former Federal Aviation Administration investigator who said the CIA in 1987 tried to hush up the sighting of a huge lighted ball 4 times the size of a jumbo jet in Alaska. He also mentions how the United States have been trying to reverse engineer some alien technology. Be sure to subscribe for more official information, reports and testimonies.
John Callahan, if you could begin.
All right, I don't know what I can do in 10 minutes, but I'll do the best I can. Apparently, you guys already have a copy of what I'm going to say. I'll just hit the highlights. I was the division chief of the Accidents, Evaluations, and Investigation Division of the FAA in Washington, D.C. from 1981 to 1988. I was the first man selected for that position, and we created that position. It came about after the air traffic controller strike. FAA had no quality control in the system until the strike, and then I was selected for that position, and it turned out to be a division with 5 branches. During this time, I was involved in the investigation of an extraordinary event and was asked not to talk about it. Since retiring, I decided the public had a right for this information and that they could handle it. And nothing's happened to me as a result of discussing this out in public. In early January of 1987, I received a call from the air traffic control facility out in Alaska. It was the region, and they wanted to know what to tell the media. That apparently the office was full of media. They had them in the hall, and every time they went out to do anything, the media was sticking the microphone on their face, and they wanted to know what to tell them. So I said, tell them about what? And he says, about the UFO. And the next one was, what UFO? We had established a procedure that if anything newsworthy happened in the FAA, we in our division were to know right away so we could defend the United States government. Anyway, I said, what UFO? And he says, a couple of weeks ago is what he told me, and it was really a couple of months ago. They had a UFO chase a 747 across the Alaskan skies for some 31 minutes. But like, who believes in UFOs? And somehow the media heard that this was going on, and now they're out there in the halls, and he didn't know what to do. They couldn't do their job, and he was kind of panicking. So I gave him our official answer. Tell them it's under investigation. And once you tell them that, they kind of drift away and they're all gone. Then I said, I want you to pack up all that data we have, all the computer data. And in those days, when we talk about computer data and disk, we're talking about those disks that were like a 78 record player. And it looked like a pie case that they have in the delis. There'd be 10 or 12 of these things inside. That was the disc that we're talking about, not these little things you carry around with you today. So I said, I want all that stuff. I want the voice tapes. I want everything sent to the FAA Tech Center by tomorrow morning. You put them on the red-eye flight, and we're going to go down to the Tech Center and look at what you have. And the Tech Center is where they create the software programs for the FAA, 548 facilities there were at the time. I used to run that automation department, had 176 people working for me. They also had a program called Playback, or I had another name too, I forgot it right now. Anyway, you could go into the facility at the Tech Center, and you could walk into one of the control rooms, and you could say, I want this position to be set up exactly like the position in Alaska. I want to stand over here and look at the radar and see what the controller's seeing. I want the voice tapes to come out of the speaker above, and I want them synchronized with what we're looking at. So when the man says he's over Alaska, I want the radar to say he's over Alaska. And I want to see what was going on. I want to hear what was going on. Well, they played it for me. And toward the end, while we're looking at it, they would shut the program off. So I said, I want you to play it again, but don't shut the program off until I tell you to shut it off. And I had bought a camera with me, what do they call these cameras here? The ones that play these things here. Anyway, I took a video of it the second time they played it. And it was the first time I really used the camera, and it was a little shaky if you ever get to look at it. But it shows you everything that was on the screen. And as they're playing the second one, they shut it off again toward the end. And I finally said, there must be something wrong with our communications, because I didn't come from the South. I said, I want you to leave it on until I say, shut it off. And they were a little hesitant. They didn't want to do that. And I finally told the engineer there, I said, you either do it, I tell you, or tomorrow you're going to have to find another job. So they let it play. Well, toward the end, the controllers had taken a United, and they asked him if they could delay his arrival time and have him check this 747 that was coming southbound. So they vectored him over to the 747. He's about 2,000 feet beneath them. And the United says, it's a beautiful airplane, the moon behind him, it looks good. He says, it's so clear up here, you can see into next Tuesday. And then he passed by. Well, after he passed by, that target that had been chasing the 747 turned around and started following the United as he went down into Alaska. Now, when the Japanese pilot first commanded the frequency, for you guys that are familiar with radar or how the military or the controllers work, when he first commanded the frequency for the controller, the first words out of his mouth was, do you have traffic for me? And when the controller hears these words, it means doom, because right away he forgot something. He's got somebody else up there that shouldn't, and why would a pilot ask if we had traffic? And he looked at his scope and he says, negative, there's no traffic in your area. And the Japanese pilot says, oh yeah, there's traffic out here. And it's at 12 o'clock and about 8 miles, he's telling them. Well, the next thing the controller says is, can you tell me what type is? Can you make out the type of aircraft? Any markings on the plane that we can find out who it is? He's thinking it's a military aircraft. And the Japanese pilot says, there's no markings. It's as big as 4 aircraft carriers. It has yellow and white lights around the center. And it's big, and he was a little bit worried. Well, this machine followed him down for 31 minutes. Halfway through his flight, he makes a 360-degree turn. Now, when I say he makes it, he doesn't do anything unless the FAA says you can do this. So they told him, if you want to deviate, you want to change your altitude, let us know. And he changed his altitude a couple times, makes a 360, and this UFO stayed with him all the way. Scared the pants off him. I don't know how much more time I got. Anyway, when I got done with
about a minute and a half to 2 minutes.
Okay, so I shoot back to the FAA Center, and the administrator at the time was Admiral Ingen. I don't know if you guys knew Admiral Ingen. I got there about 4:45 because I wanted to go home with my wife. And he heard I was in the building, so he calls me up and he says, give me a 5-minute briefing on what you're seeing. So I gave him what I'm telling you guys here. And he wanted to know if that video I took would play on his TV, and I said, I guess so. The book says it can. So I plugged it in there, and after a few minutes of watching the video, he calls the aide over and he says, go tell Kennedy I'm going to be a few minutes late. So he's watching it a little bit more, and then he finally calls the aide over and says, go cancel the rest of my appointments tonight. We'll reschedule for sometime next week. He says, I have to go see the president, and we're talking about Reagan. So when he got all done, he says, don't talk to anybody. I'll get back with you, and I'll tell you what to do. I'm on my way to see Reagan. Next morning, I came to work, and I got a call from some guy who said he was at the CIA. He wanted to talk about a UFO. I said, well, you're talking to the wrong guy. I don't know anything about UFOs. He says, well, the one that happened over Alaska, I said, you probably want to talk to the Admiral. I don't know what you're talking about. A few minutes later, the Admiral calls down and says, I've set up a briefing for you tomorrow at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever it was, in the round room. He says, the president's scientific staff is coming over. Some CIA guys will be there. I think he said 3, matter of fact, and some grunts will be coming along with them. He says, your task is to hand this stuff off to them. When they leave here, they have to take this with them because the FAA does not control UFOs. Now, I showed them all this stuff, and when they got all...
about 45 seconds. So.
Okay. When they got all done, one of the scientists come out and said they had 3 or 4 questions they wanted to know: the speed of the antenna, the frequency of the antenna, the logarithm for the height-finding equipment. And the people I brought with me just happened to be experts, and they answered all the questions. When they get done, the CIA guy standing next to me says, to the people, this event, pointing to the big screen they have in the room, this event never happened. We were never here. We're confiscating all this data, and you're all sworn to secrecy. Scared the pants off them. I had 22 people in there, and they were leaving the room right away, don't know what's going to happen. So I said to this guy, well, what do you think it was? I'm thinking at the time it's a stealth bomber. He says, oh, he says, it's a UFO. Look at these guys, they're drooling. They can't wait to get their hands on all this data. We had boxes and boxes in those days of printouts. Can't wait to get their hands on that stuff. I says, is that right? He says, yeah, this is the first time they ever had more than a moment of radar data to look at. Now, the big key was, the word he had said, this is the first time they ever had more than a minute or so of radar data.
Okay.
And now we've got 31 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay. The people I talk to that have been involved in the reverse engineering, they call it, with the UFOs that they captured, they could, by now, because it's been, 30 years or more, they could have developed a ship that they could be out practicing with, or a group of ships. If you remember Dr. Mitchell, when he spoke, he said when he was en route to the moon, he looked out the left portal, I would have called it a window, and he called down to NASA and said, I'm now a Flight of 2. He thought that that spaceship flying along with them was made here in the United States, and they were flight checking it. So it is possible that the United States has been making these UFOs, but I don't think they're going to tell us. And it's just one of those, how do you really know?